Okay, in this lesson we're learning about the endocrine system, and we should know by now that that's all about a secreting cell, and it's going to put a chemical messenger into the bloodstream, and it's going to reach that target cell somehow. All right. So obviously we're talking about a lock and key mechanism a couple of lessons ago. So this is all about making sure that the correct messenger is going to the correct target cell. If the messenger goes to a different cell that's not attuned or ready to receive that chemical messenger, then it's not going to do anything. Okay, so the endocrine system kind of covers off on a lot of stuff, like a hell of a lot of organs here, and generally all the same, except when we come to the sex glands there. So we're talking chemical signals this time. Often, yes, they are hormones that are proteins. Okay, there can be other types of messages. Endocrine glands are ductless, which means they're not exactly like shooting anything out, they're just secreting. So it's just coming out slowly. So when you talk about the nervous system, you'll see that there's a massive difference in speed between the endocrine system and the nervous system, which I'm sure we'd already have a basic understanding of. And the hormones are transported via the bloodstream, and that's part of the reason why it's quite slow. There's a lot of different organs here. These are all pretty cute. And we're going to cover off on most of them. I think we're not going to cover off on the salivary gland or the prostate in this particular one, or the mammary, or the thymus, actually, but everything else is being covered today. Right, let's start with the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus is pretty much in charge of everything, and it's special because it's actually nerve tissue. So it links the nervous and the endocrine system. It's not a gland, it is part of the brain. It actually backs directly onto the pituitary gland, which is going to be next, and it kind of gives it all of its directions. So there we go, direct control of the pituitary, and it does actually take control of quite a lot of the metabolic processes in your body, so how the cells are completing respiration and all those kinds of things. It does produce a couple of different chemical signals. Now, they don't necessarily call them hormones, but sometimes they're called neurohormones. Oxytocin is the love hormone, all right? That's the one that encourages, say, mammals to bond. It also causes the contractions in labour, and ADH is involved with making sure that the levels of water in the blood are appropriate. And it's about the size of an almond. There you go. Okay, pituitary. The pituitary is the master gland of the body, and that is because it is in charge of pretty much everything. It is attached directly to the hypothalamus, hangs down low, two little things we're going to chat about later, and it has a posterior and an anterior, and both of those do different things. It has that direct connection, so the hypothalamus can give it orders very, very quickly, and then it can start to disseminate that information or start to give out hormones that can stimulate other endocrine organs. The pineal gland, pineal, I don't know, it's said in a lot of different ways. Take your pick, really. It's in charge of melatonin, and that's part of your sleep cycle. And so in teenagers, often it's a bit out of whack, but it's really important that it follows circadian rhythm. And melatonin is produced when there is a lack of light. So as it gets dark in the day, your body starts to produce melatonin, it makes you sleepy. And then the flip side is when the sun comes up, makes you awake. Now that works perfectly fine with me. As soon as the sun goes down, I'm ready to just switch my brain off. However, in teenagers, it doesn't work like that. Sometimes it can work almost opposite. So while the hormone levels of the bodies are going up and down in puberty, this one is particularly out of whack. Now, the pineal gland looks like a pine cone, apparently, when you dissect it out of the brain. And there's a surprising amount of strange mythology and yeah, I don't know. It's a really strange one, and there's a lot going on if you do some research, if you're really into it's not Illuminati, but that kind of stuff. Okay, the thyroid sits around your throat, okay, and it straddles there. So the larynx is sitting up here, and then your windpipe, so it sits in between those two, and in it the parathyroid gland. So we'll get to that in a minute, and it produces thyroxine or thyroid hormone. You sometimes hear it called. So really imaginatively named. Very important for metabolism, blood pressure, heart rate, and growth. Now, it's in a negative feedback loop directly with the pituitary. So pituitary actually produces TSH, or thyroid stimulating hormone. Again, pretty much does what it says on the tin. It does what its name says. And it says, okay, if there's TSH in the blood, then if there is thyroxine in the blood, the TSH is going to say, you know what, we don't need any more of this, and the TSH will cease from the pituitary gland. However, if there is not enough thyroxine in the blood, the pituitary says, okay, we need to actually increase the level, and the pituitary will create TSH, which then in turn stimulates the thyroid, which will then create that thyroxine. It's really, really common to have problems with the thyroid. And unfortunately, one of the side effects of having hypothyroidism, or your thyroid isn't doing the job it's supposed to, is to be incredibly sleepy. And you need a lot of iodine in your diet to make sure that the thyroid is working properly. So my thyroid makes me want to sleep. That's generally what happens if you have low thyroid, and also can lead to weight gain and just general lethargy and stuff like that. Okay, the parathyroids sit within the thyroid, and it produces parathyroid hormone, which is in charge of making sure that calcium, phosphorus, and magnesium, and all those other kinds of ions are in the correct balance in the blood and the bones. So if we think about the balance of minerals, it's really important that you have to have enough in the system, in the blood system, in the peripheral blood system to go round, because it's important for your nerves to work, to have those magnesium, phosphorus, and calcium, because they use the ions to pull them in and churn them out to get that electrical signal flowing, which we'll look at later on. However, if you've got hyperparathyroidism, it means there's an increase of calcium in the blood, and therefore your bones aren't taking in enough. And this is quite common in women, and therefore can lead to some kind of osteoporosis. And the flip side is, if you've got hypoparathyroidism, then there will be less calcium in the blood, and therefore your nerves don't fire very well. All right, the pancreas is so if we're going to start comparing things, so we said the hypothalamus looks like an almond, the pancreas looks like a bit of a cob of corn. I don't know, I don't make this stuff up. It is the biggest of the endocrine organs, but it is a multitasker, okay? It does also produce digestive juices and things like that. So it's not just an endocrine organ, it can produce other things. Its main purpose is to produce insulin and glucagon, and they are in charge of the glucose levels in your bloodstream. So again, we're going to look at that more in depth down the track, but we have different types of cells within these islets of Langerhans inside the pancreas, right? So if we dissected it open, we'd see lots of little things like this, and it has a blood supply attached to it. And this islet of Langerhans in here has alpha, beta, and delta cells. Now, we're not going to worry about the delta cells at all, but we are going to look into the alpha cells and the beta cells. The insulin is produced from the beta cells, and that's in charge of making sure that your blood sugar goes down, and glucagon does the exact opposite. All right, the adrenals sit on top of the kidneys, all right, and we split them into two, and the outer part is called the cortex, and the inner part is the medulla. And we're going to look more in depth about how they manage water balance in the system later on. Oh, sorry, this is part of your kidney, but the kidneys have this cortex and medulla, but as does the adrenal gland, right? So an inner and an outer section. The medulla is pumping out the adrenaline, which also has a name of epinephrine. So if you think about, say, EpiPens, that's why they're called EpiPens, because they're actually pumping adrenaline into the person. And they also produce noradrenaline or norepinephrine. And strangely enough, they do the same job, right? They're only chemically different by a couple of little atoms, but they're doing the same thing. The cortex, so the outer part, is actually involved with cortisol, which is making us manage stress better, and aldosterone, which is part of the water balance situation as well. So this medulla is producing hormones that are involved with our fight or flight response. Ovaries in the female, we know that they are there to produce gametes. That's what their main idea is. But part of that comes estrogen and progesterone, hormones that are produced from there as well. And they are produced by the menstrual cycle and because of the menstrual cycle. So once an oocyte, so once an egg is matured and it is removed from the ovary, that's when corpus luteum, where previously the egg was maturing, that's where the corpus luteum can actually start producing different hormones. The testes are the equivalent in the men, and they also produce gametes. They produce those sperm, and they are in charge of producing testosterone, or the male characteristic hormone. And it's really important to know that the the estrogen and the testosterone are really important at developing the characteristics of the male and female as we know it. So having access or having the ability to have them available whilst embryonic development is occurring is what's going to give an individual those characteristics. Right. So the testes produce the sperm and testosterone sort of at the same time. So the spermatozoa, the tiny baby sperm, are being produced. They are then funneled into the central area and then delivered out of the testicles. However, the cells, at puberty, the testosterone production begins in the interstitial cells. So in the similar sense to when menstrual cycle begins in a female at puberty, this testosterone production really does increase during puberty as well.